Hey everyone, this is David Andrade from Theory Animation, and this week I want to share with you a presentation that we hosted just a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles at SIGGRAPH 2013. We hosted a panel on remote collaboration, and we invited some amazing artists to show off their work and talk about their process. Now this panel was really long, so we're going to break it up into two parts. The first was a presentation on remote collaboration and the hardships and tools that you can use. And then next week, we'll upload the Q&A that lasted over an hour. We really dove into the nitty-gritty of working remotely.
As you can see, this talk is about managing online creative projects. We have a panelist of a handful of people that have run online productions. We're just going to go down the line here, and then we'll go on to the next spot.
Hey there. Thanks for coming out. My name is Mark Olson. I'm production pipeline developer for Theory Animation.
Hey everyone, my name is David Andrade, and I'm a director and co-founder at Theory Animation.
My name's Michael Kaywood. I was the director on Devil's Angels and Dating, which was an online collaboration that finished up last year, and we had about 100 people working on that from all over the world.
And I'm Shane Davis. I was a production manager for Devil's Angels and Dating, and I'm working with Theory Animation.
Hey everyone, my name is Matthew Barenti, and I'm co-director of Love in the Time of Advertising, which is a short film that's in the electronic theater. We're also creative directors at a commercial company called Wolf & Crow.
I'm David Boxer, the second half of that.
Hi, my name is Kenny Roy. I am a teacher and studio owner in LA, and I run a collaborative production training environment called Collabs that uses Theory Animation's pipeline.
Hi. Okay. So just to give you all an idea of what we're about to be talking about, I'm actually going to dive into what we think the future of remote collaboration might look like. Give you an interesting factoid. I think it was the United Nations that recently predicted that 70% of the world's population was going to be living in cities. And I think they've overlooked what has been happening in remote collaboration. And I'd like to challenge that idea and present to you some of the things that might go against that. First of all, this is a quick summary of some of the things that have been happening within animation since it began. And you can see there's a lot of things that have changed in a very big way. I mean, even since I came into the industry about 15 years ago, 2D has moved over to CGI animation, largely speaking. Talent has gone from being rare to abundant. The quality of life has dipped to some degree, and there are a lot of people that are kind of having to live out of suitcases. There are a lot more feature films now than there were a decade ago, and there are a lot more studios. But the funny thing is that the cost of those features, relatively speaking, adjusted for inflation, is still pretty high. But we're at the cusp of a point now where we can actually start to consider doing cheaper features. Actually, one thing I just want to preface is that I'm going to, for the purpose of this presentation, just kind of use animated features as my talking point, but it kind of expands out to visual effects and a lot of other industries in exactly the same way. It's just easier to talk about it from one focal point only for the time being. So to start out with, if we look a little bit into the past, we had one studio working in one location with a large number of artists, and there's a great deal of efficiencies that you get out of this. As time goes by, those studios are looking to cut their costs by adding subcontracting studios, and we all know about them. There are medium-sized studios in various points around the world that plug into the larger studios' pipelines in order to give them access to cheaper artists. And then they add in more subcontracting studios. And as you build up to this sort of level, you're looking at 3 different studios, more often than not, that all started with very different pipelines and are trying to figure out how to collaborate with each other. And they either have to change their pipelines to match each other on different projects, or we come up with very clever tools to synchronize between them. But basically, each time we add another studio or something like this to it, we start to introduce some major inefficiencies. And if any of you have worked with remote work before, you kind of know that a lot of the downsides to it. People in various different, one studio will be kind of antagonistic towards the people in the other studio. They start blaming each other for things that are going wrong, and inefficiencies build up because there's a lack of communication and the files aren't moving around quickly enough. All kinds of things happen. I'm going to jump to a slightly different issue here now. In the top middle section, what we're looking at are the cities, and this is the areas where we have high cost of living and a lower quality of life, generally speaking, for the money that you spend. And then if you go further out from that, you've got the towns and the smaller cities, where you've got a medium cost of living, and you can afford to possibly buy a house or get on a mortgage of some sort. And then you'll move out to other areas where you've got a lower cost of living and a higher quality of life, potentially, but you're much further away from all of the jobs. So as I was going back to my original point, everybody has been moving into the cities to gain access to the jobs, but as they do so, they are actually moving away from areas where they can afford to buy a home, they can afford to spend time with their families, they're working longer hours, and all in aid of getting access to bigger and better projects and jobs. Now, if we overlay that with the studios, what we're looking at here is a large quantity of the people that are making the product are working in very high cost of living areas, and they're trying to work with studios that are in slightly lower cost of living areas in order to save some money, and this makes sense. But as I already told you, there are a lot of inefficiencies involved in this. We actually, I've seen some examples where we start to bring in freelancers who are working from bedrooms from home, and this can be done a lot more easily now than it used to be, but it still introduces more inefficiencies. And I was working in a studio last year where we had people working from bedrooms, and it was really great, but they were at least a day behind what was going on in the studio. So you had to be very careful about what was being sent out to those people. Now, you can build up the number of freelancers as you go along, but every time you do, you're kind of exponentially increasing the amount of complication that is involved and slowing down things and making it inefficient. And now, this is where I'd like to introduce a sort of a new theory. And this is more close. I'm kind of calling this, we'll call it the Virtual Studio Cloud Hub, whatever name you want to give it. I've been using the word virtual studio a lot. But the theory is that you create a core technology in one place that provides all of the tools. It's like a centralized studio in the virtual cloud where everybody can upload their shots, put all their briefings up, keep all their notes together in one place. And when everybody's getting used to going through that system, suddenly it doesn't actually matter where that system lies. We can actually have the guys that create those tools living in a cheaper area because they don't have to live in the most expensive areas in the world in order to keep this going. But the theory is that all of these different, the larger studio, the smaller studios, and the freelancers, if they're all working through that virtual studio, we can increase the number of people that are working together, but maximize the efficiency of how they're working together. So we can get to a model that might look a little bit more like this. And the dream of this is that what you see here is that people might be able to afford to live in lower cost of living areas, have a better quality of life, spend time with their families, and still have access to some of the best projects that are available. And we can reduce the number of people living in the high cost of living areas, so that, you know, we only really need to have maybe the directors and the producers and some of the core creative people working tightly together in the major cities. And if they then monitor what's happening in the Virtual Studio Cloud Hub, we can afford to work with lots and lots of different people from lots of different places. And one of the things I'm most keen to point out here is that with everyone worrying about outsourcing going off to other cheaper countries, actually, I think one of the things that people are overlooking right now is the fact that the largest untapped high talent base that's currently not being used at all are sitting in bedrooms, having just finished iAnimate, Animation Mentor, all of these sorts of programs, and those people may not have visas to come into the country, or they may live in, have families and they can't leave the towns that they want to be in, but there's an enormous untapped potential there of really, really good people that could be anywhere in the world. And if we have a virtual studio in place. There's no reason they can't just be plugged into it, just like anybody else, whether they're in a subcontract studio or in the main studio. So that's kind of the dream. And when you take it one step further, the idea might be that someday we don't have to even have a centralized location which costs an absolute fortune to live in, because not everybody will have to live there. So that's the dream. And some of the guys who are pioneering some of the efforts in that the most are my friends here at Theory Animation. The rest of us have all dabbled in this in one way or another, and I'm going to hand it over to them to discuss the actual details behind it all. Thank you.
Let's go down the line.
Hey everyone, my name's David Andrade. I said earlier, I'm one of the co-founders of Theory, along here with Mark, and today we want to talk a little bit about the specifics of how to actually achieve Michael's dream here. So at Theory, we were about 20-some artists based all over North America, a couple in Europe, and 2 in Brazil. And we needed to find a way in the past few years to finish our animated web series. Working remotely with people has always been difficult, and we've run across a lot of problems. And we had to identify some needs. So we came up with a list. And now, while this is not all-encompassing, I think this list fits a good amount of the things that we need to figure out. Number one, the one that's always missed, I feel, is communication. Both audio, video, but actually having a solid basic communication, a solid way to know what the other people are thinking. One of the big problems, for example, is you'll tell someone something, and you assume that the definition of, oh, this is what he means. He wants it to move this way or that way. Communication is really key, and we really work hard at that at Theory to try to establish a baseline of what we mean, what our definitions are, and how to move forward. Another problem that we ran into is file storage, right? How do we know what files, who has what? How do we sync to make sure everyone has the latest? Now, in the years since we've been developing this software, there's been a myriad of tools from Dropbox to Google to MediaShare. But we're going to talk a little bit about the system we developed in a little bit. The next part's creation. This is a big issue for a small independent studio. If you're a larger company, you may be able to afford a whole bunch of Maya licenses. And at Theory, we'd rather be honest about it. So we decided to use Blender. It was free. It enabled us to create what we wanted to create. And it was fully featured for what we wanted to do. And we're going to talk a little bit about creation. The last piece is task. How does somebody know what they need to do, right? How do you know that this person has to finish this thing at this certain time, and this is his due date? And then more importantly, how do you tell them that, you know what, this needs to be this way, or this needs to be that way? IRC, email, all these things exist, and we're going to talk about them. But the problem with it is, what happens if they forget? Or do you drill down through emails to find the one that was sent at 3 in the morning to him? How do you figure out how to tell someone something? So we're going to talk a little bit about tasks as well. First of all, I want to talk about open source tools. Bassam is here from Blender. He's directing an open source movie with the Blender Institute called Wires for Empathy. And he's been a proponent of open source tools, and we're going to go a little overview of some of the tools that he's been working on and developing. Open source tools are great. You know, if someone out here wants to start a project right away, how do you get started? There's a ton of tools out there. They're free. They're easy to use. It may take some customization to get them exactly how you want to get them to work. But the best part is that it'll work on everything. Linux, Mac, Windows, sometimes mobile. The downside to open source tools is sometimes you don't know how good they can be, or maybe someone stopped developing it. And sometimes it's a little difficult to implement if you don't have a little knowledge of coding or how to install a web server, etc. Assume tomorrow you wanted to start your own project and you had no money. These are the tools I would recommend. You can use IRC to chat with people, Mailman to establish a newsletter list to keep everyone in communication. Subversion is an open source version software out there that you can use Tortoise and run your own Subversion server, and it'll work great, and you'll have your own version of like a Dropbox. Blender is open source. You can create some beautiful artwork. Helga, which is up here, will let you go through task management and communicate with everyone. For Maya, there's a little tool called Open Pipeline, but this one has fallen prey to limited support. OpenPipeline hasn't seen an update in almost 3 years, but it's a great little piece of software to communicate with other artists and to have a set folder and file structure. And lastly, you could just write all the tools yourself. In here, right towards the end, there's a little video of one of our guys, Joe Kaiser, who's working on his own film, and he's a pipeline TD. He wrote his own tool to check everything before an animator commits a file or sends a file. They'll check to make sure everything is correct, that all the dependencies have been met. So some great tools, but like I said before, you need a little bit of knowledge, takes a little bit to implement, but it works right out of the box. Of course, some of us don't know how to program, right? Some of us don't know how to get a web server going or whatever. So what else can we use? So I want to talk a little bit about freemium tools. And these tools are out there now. They're free, they're robust. There is a lot of mobile support with them. Sometimes their scope is limited, though. That is, you won't be able to get everything that you want out of it. Or you just, as the name mentioned, freemium, you have to pay a higher cost to get what you want out of it. Is it customizable? Google Apps, well, Studio Co-op, you guys are here, and you guys are customizing Google Apps, and it's working great. But it does take a bit of effort and programming knowledge to get there. Some of the tools here are Zoom or Skype to communicate with people. This is a great way to make sure everyone can video conference or audio conference with each other. And Zoom recently added this feature where people can phone in while a web conference is going. You can listen in via phone. It's kind of cool. But then again, you're limited to 30 minutes. You're limited to about 20-some people in a meeting. And if you want to get a full unlimited amount of time, 50 people in a meeting, you have to pay, I think it's $10 to $20 a month. And same thing with Skype. Actually, the other day I had a Skype video chat and ads popped up. So think about that whenever you want to run a Skype video conference. Google Drive, Dropbox, Media Share, you send it. These all give you a base amount of storage so you can communicate with people, send them files, and have a way to check versions. Dropbox, as we all know, limits you to the amount of gigabytes, and then it's a monthly cost. Dropbox Team gives you a ton of space and a set amount of users, and same with Google. These are great tools, and again, if you don't know how to use Subversion or how to run a web server, whatever, they will get you a little farther. But as anyone who's done animation production knows, you can't do a whole film with 2 gigs of space. You can't run a whole movie with Google Drive having to slowly sync everything. A little bit about communication. Some of the guys here, like Michael, have used Ning. Ning is a great little thing. It's going to come up here in a little bit. Actually, here it is. Ning is kind of like your own social network. It was kind of like Facebook pages before Facebook pages was a thing. It lets people sign up, post updates, almost like a little forum for people to share videos and comment on each other. It works pretty decently. And MailChimp's a great way to have a newsletter and a constant, like maybe you need to do like a weekly update with the whole team or a monthly update. MailChimp will give you a few thousand users and a few thousand emails for free. Not bad. Google Apps. Google Apps is great. It does take some programming knowledge. It does take some time. Unfortunately, Google Apps isn't free. It used to have 10 users for free. I think they've since stopped that. But it's a good start. And it'll give you email, and it'll give you a whole video conferencing as well. Kind of gets you there, but you'll have to pay if you want to use more. In the past year, we've seen a large growth in software as a service tools. Adobe Creative Cloud, right? You have to pay a monthly fee to get the latest, 6.5, whatever. You have to stick on this plan and commit to it for a year. It's expensive for some people, especially when you're a small studio starting out. The internet requirement can be a pain, but Adobe makes amazing software. Autodesk has 360, which is a great system to host everything in the cloud, and you'll get constant software updates. And who knows, maybe one day there will be a Autodesk Creative Cloud where you can get Maya for a subscription service. A lot of things are moving in this direction, and if you have the capital, it is a good way to start. You'll get a fully featured program, it's production tested, and it'll work how you want it to work. But it can be expensive. Some of these tools, like I mentioned, Autodesk Creative Cloud. For video chat, there's a system called Video, which is a bit like Skype and Zoom, but way more full-featured. It's an amazing piece. Arc and Shotgun, who hasn't used Shotgun here? Shotgun's a great way to have task management now that it's integrated with Tweak and Revolver. It's an awesome piece of software. Does cost about, I think it's $50 a user now, but it works how you want it to work. So again, this is something to think about. At Theory, we're a small company. You know, we don't have a huge budget. We have to build what we can and incorporate what we can. So we decided to build our own tools and mix in a few other things. Realizing that what our problems are, communication, file storage, etc., we started off with one of the, I think, key components is sync. Sync is our version of a Subversion wrapper. Load it up, download all the latest files that you need. Every artist is on at the same time. Every artist is on the same version. You can restore a version. You can delete whatever you need to delete. We even have a version that kind of acts like Dropbox, where you could just throw things in and it'll sync through everybody immediately. Sync solved our data problem. It's one of the tools that we developed. Thanks to you, Mark. We needed a way to tell everyone what they're doing, right? We needed a way to tell them, hey, update your shot, or hey, this is when it's due, or I don't like the arcs in this, or the color's wrong. So we wrote a piece of software and we call it Task Tree. This lets you comment on other people's shot. You can upload video, you can upload audio, just pictures. We have a working beta where you could draw on top of things to comment how you want it. You can see previous versions. You can see different renders. You can compare versions. We built what we needed. It's not as fully featured as, say, a shotgun, but it works for what you need for just animation production. And the last really, really cool thing that we built is this thing we call Theory Render. It's kind of like SETI at home, but for rendering. It's a really pain in the butt to sync renders. Anyone who's used Backburner or network rendering or Smedge knows that you have to get the dependencies right. What about their processor? What if they're using a totally different system, Mac, Windows, Linux? How do you do all of that? So with 20 artists working worldwide, different kinds of systems, different kinds of software, we decided to write a tool called Theory Render, and it plugs right into Blender. Remember, right now we're just a Blender house, and we're going to be testing it with Kenny pretty soon on Maya. What it does is it runs a little app in the background, checks for what frame or what job is needed, will check what dependencies are needed, download everything, and just render the file. Then it'll take that OpenEXR or DPX file and send it to a storage node. In our case, it's located at our home base. So overnight, it'll use 20 machines all around the world, wake up the next morning, and I have a whole list of files of what I need rendered. So you can kind of see how it works here. Here's all the jobs. Here's all the jobs that have been submitted, the percentage of files that are rendered. You can check frames, even play a little preview, see which machine rendered which job, and when it finished. It's a really handy tool, and it gets what we need done. And then lastly, on communication, we use Zoom.us. Again, it's like a Skype to meet with 25. It's limited to like 25 or 50 people, and it's great. But the other thing with communication is habit. We have a habit of meeting every Monday and then Wednesdays if we need it. This instills a sense of duty, and it instills an idea that this is actually moving forward, and we actually have momentum going. Because we realize one of the problems of doing online production is people either forget, or people either slow down, or they get too busy. But if we establish this idea that we're going to be here every Monday, it's a company-wide meeting, if you will, it establishes a precedent. And it's actually worked out really well for us. And then, of course, we do things like this, like come to SIGGRAPH and have a group get together. So these are some of the tools that we use at Theory, and my name is David Andrade. Thank you very much.
All right, I would still like to go down the line for other productions out of what tools and why online production teams and how it helped them. So go ahead and answer.
What tools? Okay, well, I kind of, my stuff predated Theory Animation. He actually approached me about halfway through my production to ask me if I could jump onto his platform, but I was too far down the line already with my own system. I made my own Ning website, which is, it's like Facebook, but it was completely dedicated towards my own film. And I essentially just went out onto forums to attract talent and people started to sign up on this thing. So it's like people were signing up for Facebook, but for the film. and they would say what their role was that they were most interested in. So I effectively built up a database of each user saying what they wanted to contribute to the project. Just to be clear, this project had 0 budget from the beginning and never had any funds at any point. But we finished a 6.5-minute film plus credits that looks like $500,000 worth of film. It really is high quality for the kind of thing that we did for no budget. And essentially, the website just corralled everybody into one place. We had a feed on the front page where we could motivate everyone. He was talking about doing video chat. We tried to do a little video chat, but actually had some problems in getting everyone in the same time zone because our team members were from all over the planet. So the most effective thing that I actually did was by keeping that front feed constantly fed with everything that was going on. It meant that everybody checking the website would always see that there was somebody somewhere making some work on it. And so the motivation level stayed pretty high, and we actually attracted about 450 users volunteering their time to work on the project, at which point if anything, the bottleneck became me, because I was acting as a sort of virtual shotgun system, managing all of these people and trying to figure out what assignments to give them and giving them all the feedback. But the whole thing was pushed through the website. They could go through forums to look at threads for every single shot and asset that was in the film. And we had a gallery for videos and images and everything like that. But at the end of the day, the real challenges were things like keeping everyone motivated, keeping them interested. One benefit I did actually have that most of these guys don't have was that I went completely public from day one, which meant that if somebody made something, they could put it into their portfolio straight away, which is actually quite rare. You never really get that situation if you're working on somebody else's short film. You have to wait for that film to come out before they usually get to show it. So that was something that worked in my favor. But these guys will probably have very different stories to tell because they were trying to keep things much more secret.
Cool. You have anything?
Yeah, we definitely had a different experience than Mike because we did try to keep it very secret. And the reason we wanted to do online remote collaboration is we kind of had no choice in the matter. When I started, I just moved out to LA, and Matt was still in Atlanta at the time. So we had to find a way to collaborate there. And then once we got into the production, we were trying to bring more of our friends into it and more people we knew from school because we were starting out and didn't know a lot of people in the area. So we progressed. I feel like we didn't have a lot of the later challenges than Michael experienced because we got all the way through final animation and locked animation and modeling assets, and then studio fortunately picked it up, Wolf and Crow, which our creative director is at right now. So that's something that we're definitely interested in progressing because we were working on a lighting and rendering pipeline. I think a lot of the hardships we experienced is the same with Mike, trying to get people motivated. When you're working on online collaboration, you don't, especially for a low budget or no budget project, people are going to take jobs and your shot's not going to get done, and you have to either find a way to replace them, or communication is a huge issue in that regard. So that was the biggest hardship we faced in our production.
Cool. Well, I'm going back to the question that was asked, one of the slides in the beginning, which was why online collaboration, and its benefits and hardships. Kind of, for me, it works on a little bit more of a macro scale. Are there a lot of animators in here? Yeah, a lot of animators. Is there anyone who's like not in animation at all? No? Yes? Okay, if you out. I'm kidding. So what I did, my program is called Collabs, and basically the entire idea behind Collabs is that we are going to be producing stuff online and together, and I want it to be the artists who are in control of all that. And sort of like to answer why online, why I did that was because I'm terrified of the idea that the major studios are going to be the ones that dictate how we get there. And if, you know, it's like, I imagine in my head, it's like almost like Terminator 2, like where the skulls are like being crushed by the tank, you know, in that first shot. And like all like animators down there, like that's how I see it. Like if we leave it up to them. So my idea was to just basically put together a production level course for animators. And instead of working on, everyone was going to make their own little thing, you know, 10-second, 15-second, 20-second, like little short or sequence or whatever. We'd all work on the same thing. So obviously we had to collaborate. In fact, I have some of my collaborators right here. Raise your hands, guy. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. I'm looking at you. There you are. And right back there. So what we worked on was a trailer for a feature film that I have some interest from a independent distributor to produce. So basically, so like a macro scale, the hardships for me are, you know, how are we going to convince people that are in these, you know, the green light position that an online collaboration will actually even finish something, because it hasn't really been done on a large scale. So the benefits, of course, are all the things that Michael pointed out. But the hardships, it's a very, very long road. It's going to be a very steep climb from here. But I'm convinced that even as hard as it's going to be and as difficult as it's going to be, we have to do it ourselves. We all have to start collaborative online projects so that we are the best at it, and we don't have like, you know, Universal and Paramount and whatever saying like, okay, well, this is how an online system works, and then we find out that, you know, 10 years from now, none of us can do it because they built a system that's crappy and we hate it, and we're right back where we started. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Do you have anything to add on the benefits and hardships at Theory?
You know, I come from a background of working at Rhythm and Hues and on games and everything, and my favorite, and not the dog Rhythm, I loved working there, but we had like 7 layers before we got to a director. We had 7 layers before we got to a director. That means if I made a shot, it went up, no, change it this way, up, change it that way. I literally did a shot 500 times of just a helicopter into a face. That's one of the hardships, I think, of working in a larger studio with a lot of myriad of different people and different layers. So at Theory, one of our benefits is that it's immediate communication, or if it's not, it's sitting in your inbox or it's sitting in a task tree. So you know, as soon as you wake up or you'll get a buzz on your phone, hey, just check this out. You know, it opens those lines of communication. And for us, that really works really well. The downside, of course, is like Michael, we do have people in different time zones and everything, so how does somebody know when they're going to get something or when they're going to update? Email works really well, but our task tree really, it'll buzz everybody's phone if you have it attached to it, like, hey, here, wake up, here's something or whatever. I guess not wake up, that'd be terrible. Wake you up at 4 in the morning, get your shot done. But the idea is it'll communicate to you, and that's huge. And actually, I would argue that communication is a lot easier online. Plus, who here has been in infinite number of meetings and got nothing done in a day? Right? Yeah, everyone just put your hands up because you know it's true. All right, we don't have those problems. We can send it, it can be there waiting on your own time when you need to check it out. So that's one of the benefits, but like I said, hardships are time zones. Time zones are a big hardship, but we deal with it.
I think some of the hardships of doing an online production are software and like making sure that everyone's got the right software and you have software, the right tools for the artist. Sometimes they might get frustrated because this version has a bug or something like that. So they either have to wait a whole day or hopefully you can fix the bug sooner. But I think having support for your software that you're using is very important. And that's why I've tried to, when I develop my software, try to fix the problems as soon as possible, because if someone's stuck and can't download a file, it really stops them from getting any production done. So,
actually, one of the things I wanted to talk about just briefly was I've worked at a number of studios that have all attempted to use remote collaboration, but what usually happens is that they pull the trigger on this thing at the last second because for whatever reason, either they find that costs are going through the roof and they're suddenly looking for a way to cut costs, or it could be a commercials type thing where they get the job on a Friday and they're suddenly having to kick off very large teams very quickly on Monday. But simultaneously, they're trying to start up a remote system. And what often happens in those cases is that they think it's really easy to just have the producers bounce some emails backwards and forwards between subcontracting studios and freelancers. But that is a huge bottleneck that takes a really long time for communication to move backwards and forwards. And so what I would really love to see is a few key systems like theory animation, like Shotgun, and things like that, that people get used to the idea of using and integrating into their daily workflow so that when they expand and they suddenly need to get all those people together, everybody's used to the systems and they can jump onto it quickly and it all works and it works efficiently. Because right now what's happening most of the time is a very, very long maneuver between one person and the next. As a prime example, some of the stuff I was doing last year, we had to have people dedicated to the task of moving files from one FTP server up onto another internal network drive, where someone else would then do a tweak internally to change all the texture paths and all of this kind of stuff so that it could be integrated. Then we're going to play blast it, put it into the official system. By the time the director's seen it, the person who was working on it off-site had finished it 2 days ago. And it takes 2 days to get the feedback to that person as well, if your system isn't really, really well honed. So I'm kind of hoping that with wider use of this kind of stuff that we can cut all of that out and get to a point where it's much more efficient.
So I hope you enjoy this week's presentation, and we'll see you next week.